Welcome to the Breech Birth Podcast. I'm Sasha Hopkins, private midwife, breech birth educator, and your host. This is a space to hear the real, raw, and powerful stories of women who have experienced breech birth in all its layers. Each episode features honest conversations with women who've experienced breech firsthand, offering insight and reflection. This podcast was born from the knowing that these stories need to be heard, to inform, connect, and reclaim the story of breech birth. Whether you're navigating breech birth yourself, supporting others, or simply curious, welcome and thank you. The Breech Birth Podcast is independently created and produced. If you'd like to support the continuation of this space, you can do so through Buy Me a Coffee. Your support helps keep these stories being shared and accessible to women and families around the world, and you can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for being a part of this community. Hi, Chloe. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Before we jump into your story, let's go through our context questions. What year was your baby born?
She was born 2024, December.
And where are you located?
So I'm on the south coast of England.
Amazing. And how many weeks were you when you had your bub?
I was 38 and 2, I believe.
And what sort of care did you receive during your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum?
So for my pregnancy, I had the initial meeting with a midwife, home birth midwife, and then I chose to have a hands-off pregnancy. So sort of more outside of the system and without the routine kind of care.
Yeah. And that's the same for birth and postpartum?
So for the birth, I had intended on having an unassisted, unmedicated home birth. And then that turned into a C-section. And then for postpartum was just the kind of basic care that you get in the UK. So they come, I think you get 3 or 4 visits postpartum.
Yep. Okay. And so we had a caesarean, but intended for a free birth.
Yes. Yeah, that would have been the ideal outcome.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we jump into that story, do you want to share a little bit of a snapshot about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am 33 years old now. And I'm a personal trainer. So I've worked as a personal trainer for the last 8 or 9 years, kind of specifically with women. I like to give a lot of kind of strength and confidence in the gym environment and just kind of generally training, that kind of stuff, because it's been male dominated for a long time. So that's what I enjoy doing. Had a bit of a background in dance as I was growing up, but found a little bit more passion in the kind of fitness space after a while. Mum of 1, first baby so far. And yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, really.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, do you want to start right at the beginning, when you first felt pregnant, what that looked like? Did you know much about the care that was on offer?
Yeah. I guess it kind of starts even a little bit pre-conception. So my husband and I, we renovated the house that we live in now, which we bought in 2019. And whilst we were renovating, we had a lot of time on our hands, a lot of time spent in the garden. And then obviously once 2020 kicked off. So I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts and I kind of stumbled into the free birth stories, that kind of stuff, because we knew we wanted to start a family. So I started my birth research, birth education from 2019, 2020 onwards. And yeah, we always knew we wanted a little bit more of a holistic, more natural kind of approach to conception, birth, all that sort of what we knew of at the time. So yeah, when we finally fell pregnant, that was early 2024, and right before we got married actually in Bali. So we found out we were pregnant pretty much straight away because we were consciously trying to conceive. So that was the March, I believe, of 2024. And then because we had all the wedding and stuff going on, we were kind of like, we'll deal with what we might want to do when we. So by the time I sort of notified the NHS, and you do an e-form, you tell them what you would like, home birth, hospital birth, and then the relevant midwife will contact you. So obviously you get assigned a midwife.
And that's included in healthcare over there, isn't it?
Yeah. So you do like the e-form, and then obviously if you want a hospital birth, they'll take you through those options. And if you go with the home birth, you get a community midwife. So they're a slightly different team, although they might do shifts in the hospital if they do agency, that kind of stuff. So yeah, my assigned midwife, she contacted me. I think I would have been about 16 weeks when I eventually got in contact with them, but I was a little bit confused about the dates of when they consider you to have been pregnant from. Initially, they thought I was around 20 weeks pregnant. I wasn't, I was only 16. So the call I got was a little bit like, why haven't you contacted us sooner? And I was like, well, I've been getting married and I've been in Bali for 3 weeks and, had a great time. But yeah, so because on the initial form, I knew that I didn't want to have a deeply kind of medicalized pregnancy, because I like to live my life. I don't want to be going back and forward to appointments and things like that. If it's not really necessary, if I wasn't unwell, I didn't want to be in and out of the doctors where I would go for some of my appointments. So I kind of made that clear in the initial phone call. And then my midwife said, well, let's meet face to face and we can have a little bit more of a chat, because I was declining kind of all of the initial ultrasounds. And yeah, my husband and I were happy with, for all of the initial screenings that you get, no matter the outcome, we knew how we wanted to proceed with the pregnancy anyway. So yeah, that was kind of the initial
So did
stage.
you end up having any ultrasounds?
No, I didn't. Well, actually, tell a lie. I did when I was in labour, like right at the last minute, because of the breech positioning. They were like, "Oh, hang on a minute." But yeah, that was right at the very end.
Yeah. And what about blood tests? Did you have any blood tests at all?
No, I didn't have any blood tests. I think the most I had actually was a blood pressure reading in that initial meeting with midwife. And that was kind of it, really. Yeah, I just went on my merry way. I felt really good throughout my pregnancy as well, because I was working in the gym. I was actually managing the gym at the time. I've now stepped down because it's too much to do with a 1-year-old in tow, and I want to make the most of her while she's little. But yeah, so I was just quite happy going about my normal day-to-day life, doing quite long days. I was on my feet a lot and teaching spin classes and all sorts of stuff, kind of literally up until labour started, which in hindsight, I don't think I would do again, because I think the way things kind of went, it potentially played a part in that. But yeah.
Before you jump into that, I'm curious how that conversation with the midwife went and what made you go, okay, I don't need a midwife if I'm not doing all the tests.
Yeah. I mean, as midwives go, it was nothing personal with the care on offer. I am quite an independent person, and I find it quite hard to take help from people. So I think that kind of definitely is a bit of an anchor in my general way that I live my life. And I think we just kind of said, okay, well, let's book him for your 28-week appointment, which you would have anyway, because I'd missed a lot of the preliminary meetings anyway by being 16 weeks. And that was for the RH blood test. That would have been around that time I wanted to do that. And whether I wanted to have the vaccination for that, which I knew that wasn't something that I was necessarily.
I'll just clarify the wording around that. It's, so if you have a negative blood type, you're offered what we call anti-D. So it's not a vaccination, but it is a blood product.
That's the one. Yeah. Yeah. So I knew that wasn't something that I wanted, because I did know my blood type and I knew it was positive, but I couldn't remember exactly which one it was. But yes, with the research I'd done around that, I was happy to go forward without having that. I'm confident kind of in my choices there. But yeah, she was fine with that side of things. I just said to her, look, ultimately what I would like to do is just be pregnant and not feel like I'm having to rearrange my life to come and see you, or come and, have all these different things, go out of my way and out of my normal kind of routine. I would like to just continue as I am. And if I feel like I need you, I would like to contact you. But otherwise, I would like to just keep going about my day-to-day activities. Yeah, I'm a fit individual. I take care of myself. I'm conscious on my nutrition and things like that. So if I am unwell, I'm fairly in tune with myself, I would like to think, to be able to manage myself, essentially.
Yeah. And so to her, would that look like then literally having a wild pregnancy, and if you needed her in labour, she would come? Because obviously I'm in a setting where we're privately practicing, like we are paid individually by the women. And so a lot of us have boundaries around, we want to build that trusting relationship with a woman. So then if we do need to attend birth, we already know them, they know me, that sort of stuff. So I'm curious around, because it's a different setting, she's hired by NHS, and whether that's okay, sure, we can just turn up if you need us in labour.
Yeah, they would definitely prefer it if you did have more contact with them. And again, now with hindsight, if I was to go down that kind of route with the NHS again, I think it would definitely be more beneficial, because they did discuss, one of the big things I didn't like the idea of, and I still don't, is just because that's your assigned midwife, they may not be available for you when you go into labour. And so you could still end up with another random community midwife coming to you. So there was discussion of, well, you could meet, more of the team and things like that. And I was just kind of like, well, it feels like a lot of effort to meet more people. I spend so much time meeting new people every single day. then when you're pregnant, like the last thing you want to do is be like meeting more people. Almost for me, it feels like you have to perform. You have to still have this persona that you are for, like in work almost, which isn't the case. That's a me thing.
Yeah, I'd love to have some in-depth conversations with you, not on this podcast, around all that stuff. All right. Okay, cool. So that's the preference, but they could actually attend you in birth.
Yes, yeah, they won't deny you a midwife
That's
if
great.
you call them. Yes, yeah, and
Yeah.
I did still have that 28-week contact from them. And I just said, I don't want it, thank you. Doing well, and that was kind of it. And then I didn't see my midwife until I was actually in the hospital.
Yeah. Okay. So towards the end of the pregnancy, it sounds like you're quite busy with your work and running a gym and all those sorts of things. Did you do anything for your body and yourself towards the end to slow down and connect in?
No, I didn't. The only thing I did do with managing the gym, so I work for, it's a family gym. So I worked closely alongside the guy who owns it. And I said, look, this is my plan. I don't want to stop working and take maternity leave before I have the baby. I would like to just work until I get there, because what's the point in resting? I'll be bored. So yeah, so I still was going along my merry way. My given due date was the 26th of December, so Boxing Day. So I said, look, why don't I, from October, I'll go down to 4 days a week. From November, I'll go down to 3 days a week. And then we'll see what happens in December if I end up working all the way through, because it's first baby. So people always you almost get brainwashed into believing. And I was, very much like, yeah, sure, I could be pregnant until January, like just ready to go as long as it took. Which actually wasn't as long as I thought it would do. So I was still at 37 weeks pregnant, still teaching like 2 or 3 spin classes a week, still doing a couple of...
You're doing the spin class when you're teaching, right?
Semi. I would get on the bike, do certain things, and then get off and just G people up. Because although I didn't take as much rest as I probably should have, I reined it in, my perspective, from what I've been doing. But yes, so I would still deliver the spin classes, and I was still doing some strength training and trying to keep mobile. And when my body started to feel a little bit like achy here and there, take a little bit more attention and be like, right, okay, we need to, maybe slow down a little bit. But in terms of the workload that I had on the actual gym floor, I did a lot of admin based stuff, so I could be kind of seated for quite a few hours of the time that I was in the gym. So I'd work 8-hour shifts, but those shifts would either be 6 a.m. till 2 p.m. or 12 till like 8 or 9 p.m. sometimes, just depended if people like to chat after a session. So they were quite long shifts, and the early starts was definitely hard towards the end.
Yeah. And so body work, did you end up having any for yourself towards the end of pregnancy, like osteo, chiro?
No, I didn't, purely because I wasn't, although I knew that they could potentially be beneficial, and we have an osteopath that works from the gym, but I wanted someone who was more sort of a female-based osteopath that worked with women who were pregnant kind of specifically, and I didn't have that information, although I probably could have found that information within some of the local like birth spaces, but it wasn't something I prioritized. In terms of what I was doing physically, I felt actually pretty good, but yeah.
Okay, well, let's dive into the birth and how did it all begin? You said you were 38 and 2 when you had baby, and is that when labour started as well?
No, so I will say as well, just I think from 28 or 30 weeks, I noticed I was getting like Braxton Hicks or like tightenings. And because obviously I see a lot of women that have had, some have had bigger families, some have had smaller families. And I remember chatting to one lady and I said, oh, you've had a lot of children. Did you ever get Braxton Hicks or this sensation? Because I would feel, we didn't know that my little girl was a little girl because obviously we hadn't had any testing. But I was like, did you ever notice the baby kind of pushing out, in between your ribs and your hip here? And she was like, no, I don't think so. I can't remember that. I thought, maybe you just haven't remembered. But I had those tightenings from what I would consider quite early on. And a few of the other women that I spoke to, they said, oh, you never know. It could just be in your head sort of thing. And I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, maybe. I was like, I don't think it is, but sure. And I think from that point, I switched from sitting on like a hard chair from a quick Google search onto like the birth ball. But so then it was around the 9th of December, I believe it was, the beginning of the week. So I gave birth on the Saturday. So I think it was the Monday, which I would have been 37 and 5 or 6, thereabouts. And I remember I finished my shift. So I'd done a 6 a.m. till 2 shift. I remember finishing and I was just like, oh, just really can't be bothered to go back to the gym tonight, because what I would often do is I would finish my work shift and then I would go back for a group session I had that my husband and I, my husband's also a personal trainer, and we ran like a group session Monday, Wednesday and Friday evenings. And I remember sitting there thinking, I just really can't be bothered to go back. Like, I just don't want to go back tonight. Like, my body was telling me, like, stay at home, Chloe, stay at home. And my back was really achy. And I remember just feeling like I'm going to get a hot water bottle and just like put it on my lower back. And my mum was popping around because she had some newborn bits to drop off. So she came round and I said to her, I was like, just can't be bothered to go back there tonight. My back's really killing me. And I've had the hot water bottle on there. I'm just feeling a bit crampy. And she sort of looked at me with mum eyes and she was like, that sounds a lot like how labour started with your brother. So my mum, I'm the youngest of 3. My mum's had 3 C-sections, but she only had spontaneous labour with my brother, who's the middle and consequently was the biggest of all of us. So she sort of looked at me and I was like, oh, don't be silly. I'm like 37 weeks. Labour is time away. I said, your body just, it's probably just preparing. Maybe I've overdone it. And so I went back to work that night and...
So you still went. Your body said stay home and you still went.
Well, so with the group that we run, we do fitness assessments. And so we had some new people starting. And so my husband said to me, he's like, Chloe, I really need you there tonight. Because on some of the evenings, I would stay home and rest. And he would go back and do it solo because I wasn't needed. But it's just good to have an extra pair of hands. And he said to me, one of us needs to do this fitness test and the other needs to run the main session. So I was like, well, you're going to have to do fitness tests. I said, look at me, I'm a big gal now. Like, I can't be doing like push-ups and demonstrating exercises and whatever else. So the group of people that we had, they've been with us for a long time. So they know pretty much what they're doing, but they just need a little bit of, G'ing up.
Yeah.
A bit of motivation. And so I said to him, I was like, listen, guys, I'm really not feeling it today. I'm feeling like a pregnant mama. So forgive me if I'm a little bit out of it because I'm not feeling like myself. And I remember being like, cool, maybe this is the start of something, but almost talking myself down. I was like, no, just achy, done too much. And I remember kind of being there and feeling really out of body and like not 100% with it and sort of squatting down into a deep squat and moving my back around. And I was really like, oh, standing up is just really tiresome right now. I'm just over it. Anyway, I got through that session, went to work the next day at 6 a.m.
Oh my goodness.
And at the end of that shift at 2 o'clock, I had like this really strange radiating like ache down the back of my hamstrings, the backs of my legs. And I remember saying to my team, it's like, cool. I was like, this is a really strange sensation. I thought, I've not experienced this before. I was like, maybe I just need to have a bit of a stretch. So I went home and I stretched and I did some yoga-based stretches, pigeon stretch for glutes, hamstrings, quads, all of that, because I do get a tight back often just from the kind of stuff that I do. So I know it's something that I have to keep on top of. So I did my kind of usual bits and I was able to rest that evening. And then the early hours of Tuesday into Wednesday, it was like 1:10 in the morning. I kind of like, there was a moment where I thought something's going to happen. And then had a release of waters. And as it happened, I kind of managed to shoot the side of my bed because we just bought a brand new Super King bed, which I hadn't prepared yet and hadn't put my mattress protectors on and all that kind of stuff and spare sheets. And I remember, shooting my hips off the side of the bed and thinking, God, what do I do? And I sort of waddled to the bathroom, cupping underneath myself, hoping that I wasn't like making a mess all over the floor or anything. And I went to the bathroom. I kind of sat there for a moment and I was, in my mind, I'm debating whether to wake my husband up yet and let him know that maybe something's going to happen or not. Because in the days leading up to this, I was having little tightenings in the night, but just like little quick shooting pain sort of type ones. And it would wake me up and I'd rearrange myself and then go back to sleep. So they were just momentary kind of, I guess, little contractions that were just the ramping up of things. But on the Tuesday evening, I'd still been having cramping and using the hot water bottle on my back and stuff. So yeah, my waters released, or some of it. It wasn't like a full release of waters. It was just like very small. And I would say, I think there was a little bit of like a bloody show, which fortunately only came out as I'd waddled into the bathroom. It hadn't come out on my nice cream carpet throughout my but yeah, so I kind of sat there and debated, what do I do in this situation? Do I tell my husband yet? I don't want to wake him up if nothing's going to kick off yet, because I hadn't been having any contractions. You know, how you hear it in most birth stories is contractions start first and waters can be the last thing to go. Although I've heard a variety of stories. But anyway, and then I thought, no, right, I'm the manager of the gym. I've got shifts planned in the next couple of weeks, because this would have been the 11th at this point, Wednesday the 11th. I've got some shifts this week where I'm supposed to be solo on the gym floor because the team are off having annual leave and things like that. And I'd basically planned to work up until the 24th, when we would close the gym for Christmas Day, Boxing Day, all that kind of stuff. And like I say, there were some shifts where there would be just me on the floor, which like now, no problem, not an issue for me. But obviously being heavily pregnant is, you know, maybe not the best idea. Hindsight is 2020. Yes, I'm like, no, right, I need to let my husband know this is what's going on. He needs to make arrangements for like the rest of the stuff that he's doing, his clients, whatever. I need to make arrangements with the team. So we're both there. I woke him up and I said, just to let you know. And he says to me, is this a prank? And I was like, no, that's literally the meanest thing in the world. Like, why would I lie about this? But he'd seen a video like a week or so prior where someone had pranked their husband with it. And I was like, no, it's not funny to me. Yes, then we were both up messaging people at like 2, 3 a.m. in the morning to like pair cover and whatever else for these sessions we had. And then I think around like 4 a.m., nothing had really started. I was just getting like actions on one every half hour, maybe 45 minutes, something like that. Nothing that I was like, oh, this seems like something's going somewhere. So we got up and we tidied the house and just kind of like sorted out the kitchen and got the dishwasher unloaded and loaded. In between, I would have little sort of tightenings and I would stop for a second and think, is this more intense, less intense? And you know, nothing, like say, nothing too crazy happened. So we kind of kept going about the day on the Wednesday, and we took the dog out for a walk at one point. We usually do 2 walks a day. So a little bit later on in the day, we took him for a walk. And then for his second walk, we actually went round to my in-laws who are around the corner from us, and my parents sort of in the other direction, but also not far. And throughout the day, I would have maybe a few tightenings in an hour. And I have to say, I've never really looked too deeply into timing contractions and, you know, where people would say you should go to hospital or things like that. When it happens, whatever. Just go with the flow.
I just had a question thinking of that then. Did you do any education around labour and birth, knowing that you're going to have a free birth?
Yeah, so I didn't pay for any courses, but I have a whole plethora of books like Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Midwifery, Childbirth. I'd read a lot of the Sarah Wickham books. I think I've got all of her books actually. I'd listened to all of the episodes of The Midwife's Cauldron and, you know, Free Birth Society, like all these different birth podcasts, everything that I could get my teeth into. I had that in my arsenal of what I'd listened to and what I'd read, because I wanted to be as informed as possible. And I've been looking at all of this from 2019 kind of onwards, 2020 onwards. So I felt, and I still feel like I am fairly knowledgeable in terms of physiological birth. But obviously when you're in the depths of labour, it's not the ideal time to be trying to pick through your own brain as to what is going on. So that's where somebody else is helpful. And my husband is also big into research as well. So he'd done a lot of research, but obviously it's different. The female to male kind of perspectives is always.
Yes. And what their role looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. So Wednesday, we just kind of carried on as fairly normal, other than not working. Thursday rolled around, and in the evenings, things would pick up. I've got a note in my phone, and I kind of looked back over it recently, and I was like, oh yeah, things did actually kind of pick up in the evenings. And I would say I would get contractions that would get closer in time to maybe one every sort of 10 to 15 minutes apart. But again, nothing that I couldn't sit through. I was still watching sort of telly and just chilling out in the evening. And then I would go to bed. And again, nothing crazy would happen overnight. So then, yeah, Wednesday rolls around, Thursday rolls around. And then Thursday evening, my husband said to me, oh, if nothing really picks up tonight, do you think it's okay if I go and do a few clients at work tomorrow? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I was like, well, you know, let's not wait around. You know, it'll be fine. You're 3 minutes drive away from us. Like, everything's
Yeah.
very close where we live. It's not far away at all. Not like if you're in Australia and it's like 3
Yeah.
hours to the nearest city.
Everything's like 30-minute drive minimum here.
Yeah, yeah. I lived in Australia for a year, 2014 to 2015, and I lived in Queensland. But yeah. So yeah, Friday rolls around, and again, nothing's really happened. Things picked up in the evening, but nothing that was unbearable or anything like that. I would just
Yeah.
quietly note the timings in between the contractions, and there was still sort of anything from half an hour to like 10 minutes apart.
Mhm.
And then I went to bed Friday night. So my husband had gone and done a few sessions with clients Friday. I'd had family pop in to kind of see how I was, because they knew my waters had started releasing. Oh, and actually, before I go into Friday, on the Thursday, I said to my husband, I was like, do you mind if I just pop to the supermarket? Because I want to get a few bits for dinner. And he was like, Chloe, your waters are releasing. Like, do you think that's a good idea? And I said, well, I was like, this might be my last chance at freedom before we have a baby. Like, please just let me quickly go to the supermarket and get these things. And he was like, well, can you let my mum come with you? Like, just in case. It's like, I've got visions of you in the middle of an aisle having like a full release of waters. And I was like, no, I don't need a chaperone. Please just let me go. Because I felt fine. And obviously, with the opening of the waters, I was aware of things to watch out for, signs of infection and, temperatures, that kind of stuff. So I'm not completely silly in that respect. I was being mindful. I just thought, please let me go. Anyway, so I went to Sainsbury's. I got my bits of shopping. We needed dog food and things like that. And I remember getting back to the car. And as I'm opening the car and getting ready to put the bags in, I sort of moved to open the car door, and I had quite a more noticeable release of waters, but I was wearing pads and things like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's quite a lot of waters that have just come out. And I was planning on quickly popping in to see my mum on the way back as well, because like I say, she lives very close to me. And I sort of sat down in the car, and I felt the fluid sort of seep into my leggings. And I thought, no, I don't think I'll be going around now. I think I should go home. So I went home, and I'm laughing, telling my husband about what's happened. And he's like, that's not funny. That's exactly what I envisioned. So
At
yeah,
least you'd finished the shopping.
I got the things we needed, and I made dinner, so it was all good. But yeah, so then that night, again, nothing much happens. We roll into Friday, and nothing happens. Normal kind of day. I was like, what's happening here?
Yeah. Did you have any doubt? Like, did you seek any advice or support from the midwife, or because you mentioned the Freebirth Society, and there's some women post in there for advice?
Yeah, so I wasn't in any of their groups or anything like that. I literally just listened to their podcasts for birth stories. But what's interesting is that sort of through my pregnancy, I kind of was having like I was thinking about breech birth. I wonder if it's a little bit subliminal almost, because you maybe have heard things, but you're not remembering them in the forefront of your mind. Because I would have this like little bulge that would come out. I'm sort of gesturing to below my rib cage, and then above my hip, I would get like a pushing out of that side. And then I would also get right underneath my left-hand side rib cage, another bulge sometimes. And I'd be like, oh, that's a bit strange. Like I'd not heard anyone describe that sort of sensation. So I think breach did sort of crop up every now and again, and I would have a little look and see, but I would look at other things as well, little things that would pop up, little paranoia moments. But on the Friday, when nothing major was happening, but there was stuff happening, but it just wasn't like this big dramatic kind of, fulcrum of things going on. It was just very minor and building up. I remember I've got pictures again on my phone of I laid on the floor, and I was sort of taking like some little pictures and videos, because obviously you can't really see what your tummy looks like. So I laid on the floor, and I was doing like a little bit of palpation, which I had watched some videos on how to do. And I'd found her kind of shape before, and I knew her back was at the front of my belly, because I could tickle her back, and one of the reflexes where they kind of do the little like shudder, like as if we say like someone's walking over your grave and you get like a whoo.
Oh, yeah.
So I could do that to her back, and I could feel her sort of shudder in my tummy. But anyway, so I'm trying to figure out these two kind of lumps that are at the top part of my my bump, because she was always quite high and I had quite a small tight bump, which when people were talking to me, they were just like, oh, it's, tight core and things like that. So I definitely, I feel like there were inklings of maybe something being not as I expected in that time. But then also I was like, well, she's moving around. I'm feeling good. I never felt anything kind of untoward where I was like, oh, I need help. But yeah, so that was on the Friday. And then Friday night, the contractions definitely started to pick up a little bit more. They were more consistently that kind of 10 to 15 minutes apart. And we went to bed, let's say like 9, 10 p.m., something like that. And by midnight, I couldn't lay in bed anymore because I was so uncomfortable. And I would always lay on my right side with the pillow in between the knees and, all the position they kind of say that you should be in it for, the best kind of position for your body and such. So I sort of quietly went downstairs and I just thought, right, let's put something nice on TV because the contractions were definitely closer together. And I think I was down there for a couple of hours and then my husband realised I wasn't in the bed and he came down about 2 or 3 a.m. And at that point I was over my birth ball and we had all of our living room set up with a plastic liner on the sofa and towels out and all that kind of stuff. So we were ready in case that was where I was for the birth. I didn't have a birth pool or anything like that. I toyed with the idea, but then I thought maybe it will add just another layer of complexity to the setup of labour and maybe we wouldn't need it. We've got a bath, we've got a shower. So I thought I've got 2 venues of water if I decide that's what I'd like. And again, in hindsight, I think a birth pool might have been quite a nice idea. But anyway.
It's like the home epidural.
Yeah. And so, I was over the birth ball throughout the night. I was coping quite well and making jokes and, using my breath and stuff like that. But I was very much on my hands and knees for a long time. And I remember at one point being on my side and I managed to sort of doze off. But I was definitely in that birth zone where you're not really there, but you're not really here sort of thing. And trying to put on like music in the background. I think I was listening to like Ampan Joe for like 3 hours, which now on it, I'm like, oh, turn that off. I don't like it. It got to 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. This would have been now, and we got my mother-in-law to come and pick up our dog because we've got a little dog. And bless his heart, I quite liked having him there and stroking his fur when I was having the contractions. But my husband was like, no, I need to get rid of him, get him out of the house. And so the plan was basically just to kind of labour for as long as possible and then basically call the midwives at the last sort of minute to then come and just kind of help with like placenta and those sorts of things. If we felt like we needed a little bit of extra help, we would have maybe contacted them sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got in the bath probably about 10 a.m. because things had really started to ramp up. And I was like, oh, I know that water can sometimes like help things be a little bit less intense. And like I've been on my hands and knees for quite a while now and I'd like a little bit of relief. So I got in the bath and I don't know how long I was in there for, but once I started to get cold and the water wasn't really doing it anymore, and I thought I just need to get out of this reclined position because it wasn't comfortable. So I got out of the bath. And then my husband said to me, he's like, oh, you haven't actually really eaten anything. And although I'd made these date Snicker bites to have, I'd maybe had like 3 in the middle of the night. And then like that was it. So I was drinking electrolyte water, but I hadn't really eaten. And I was like, oh, actually, yeah, something to eat would be good. So he made me a bagel with like some cherry jam or something. I think I took 3 or 4 bites of half of the bagel. And then I was like, contractions coming, chucked it at him and was like back over the ball. And I didn't eat any more of that bagel for the rest of the day. It just kind of got forgotten about. And yes, time just kind of was going by as it does when you're in that space. My husband was timing the contractions, which were between 1 and 2 minutes apart. So they were pretty close. And from whenever I got out of the bath until about 3 p.m, it kind of stayed that way. And I felt like I couldn't be in any other position other than on all fours. It was really intense if I moved in any other direction. And then about 3 o'clock, I was like, okay, I need to get off my knees again because they were raw. So maybe I'll get back in the bath. I sort of started saying to my husband, am I allowed to get back in the bath? I don't know if I'm allowed. Is it the right time sort of thing? And definitely that need to outsource and somebody else to be like your confidence started to creep in because I was like, this is long now. I don't understand what's happening. And I could still really feel that the mass, which was her head, under my left-hand side rib. And because I was looking to my husband for a little bit more, like, what do we do? Like, I don't understand what's happening. It's taking so long. And I didn't ever feel downward pressure. I was like, these women always talk about like the pressure in the pelvis. There was never any pressure in my pelvis. She was always super high. And I've got a short torso, so it wouldn't take long to get from A to B. So at that point, we called triage to get some advice, basically, because I was like, I don't know anymore. Like I'm out of it.
Yeah.
And at that point, the contacting of the triage, I was starting to get, my adrenaline was starting to rise, which I'm quite an anxious person sometimes. So when I feel that adrenaline, I think, oh God, I need to stop this anxiety. Like, let's try and control it. Very PT of me, but to manage that adrenaline, which obviously is part of the labour hormone cocktail, but I was associating it with outside things, which I think made me more adrenalised because I was a bit scared. Anyway, so we contacted them and I thought, we're going to have this conversation. They're going to say you need to come in because your waters have been broken for this amount of time. And I'm going to have to say to them that, but if I come in, I'm more at risk of infection because I'm in a foreign space. Blah, blah, blah. And I just was having this little mental conversation in my brain, thinking that I may be having this conversation with my husband, but it's very much all internal. So anyway, that was pretty much the conversation that was also had on the phone. And my midwife was actually not working a community shift. She was in the hospital, which
Okay.
actually was really good because I ended up going. But they sent out 2 other midwives to me, but one of them was just finishing another call. So we had maybe another 2 hours. So from like 3 p.m. till 5 or 6 p.m. until anybody actually came to the house. And then when they arrived, I was out of the bath and I was back downstairs on the exercise ball. And by that point, my contractions had gone from just being fairly close together to like double and triple peaking. And I was literally just mooing like a cow at this point and bent in half like a cat over this exercise. They were so intense. I was like, this is wild. This is next level. Like, what do I do with this? And I was really, really shaky from the adrenaline and all that kind of stuff. And then the midwife that came, because they didn't know much about me, they were then asking me about my birth plan. And I was like, do you need to ask me all these questions right now? Like, is this necessary? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'd rather you didn't give me any internal examinations, but also like help me. I don't know what's going on. So anyway, they kind of asked me these questions. And that's also another thing to note about myself and probably reasons why I make the choices that I did. Find sometimes when I'm being asked questions, it can make me feel a little bit defensive, like I'm in trouble, like I'm being questioned. I can't think of the word now, but as
With the authority.
a loaded question, like as if they're waiting for you to trip up.
Yeah.
Again, totally a me thing. It kind of gives a little bit more of an idea into my mindset and the way that I plan things and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, they came into my kitchen here and they were doing obviously their paperwork and things that they have to do whilst they waited for the second midwife to arrive, because obviously they can't do anything without there being the second midwife. And then once she arrived, again, they were back in and asking me some more questions. And in between that time happening, I started to notice meconium coming out of me, which I had read Rachel Reed's Meconium Stained Waters blog and listened to a couple of podcasts on it where she went into a bit more depth about it. So I kind of was prepared for meconium, but I wasn't prepared for the amount of meconium that was coming out of me. I was like, oh my God, like that is like full brown.
Pouring out your vulva.
And like, yeah, just like trying to wipe it away and it's not going away. It just kept coming. And I was like, oh my God, like that's a lot. And that again was another thing that just started to derail me a bit because I just didn't anticipate it at all. And I remember calling my husband and being like, get the midwives, ask them if this is normal. I don't want to hear about aspiration, but tell me if that's normal, because I just couldn't fathom what was happening. And I think at that point they said, look, the only way we can kind of tell where you're at is if we maybe check you. And I was like, oh, I really don't want you fingering me. Like that's just not. But I did agree to it because I was like, I'm at a loss. I don't know what else to do. So they tried to give me a check, but they asked me to lay on my back for the check during a contraction. And that was just agony. It was the most awful thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I remember mid-contraction, whilst they've got their hand in me, I was like, get out, get out, get out. I'm going to flip over, because I just like, the position was just horrendous. And I literally flipped myself. I was on my footstool and I flipped myself off and I said, no, I can't be in that position. I was like, you need to check me some other position because that is horrendous. And when they checked me, they thought I was around 8 centimeters dilated. I can't remember if it was before or after that, but I said to the midwife that originally came to the house, I said, I feel like I can't carry on anymore. I'm so tired. This is just taking so much longer than I thought. Doesn't that mean I'm in transition? I said, I don't feel like I can carry on. And she sort of looked at me and she said, no. And I was like, oh God, if this isn't transition, then what happens when I really, really hit transition and I really don't feel like I can do it? But obviously that 7 to 10 centimeters dilation, I believe, is that point where a lot of women do hit those transitional kind of feelings. And then, of course, again, I could still feel how high she was. And I was like, this is just, nothing was computing from everything I'd listened to. I hadn't heard that many breech stories other than ones where they'd had, successful free births at home, and it was wonderful. So I felt completely at a loss, and just that crisis of confidence really crept in. And at that point in my mind, I'm going, right, well, how long does it take to get from 8 to 10 centimeters? And I said to my husband, Google it. I was like, Google it now. How long does it take? And he said, anywhere from 20 minutes to 4 hours. And I was like, oh God, I can't take another 4 hours.
I can't believe Google says that.
I was like, something along those lines.
That my answer to that question is, how long's a piece of string?
Well, yeah,
because
exactly.
it really comes down to so many factors, like the environment, your mindset, what's your body doing, what's your baby doing. There's so many layers to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And with that in mind, obviously, that I knew that the fear was a bad thing, thinking I need to stop shaking from this adrenaline. This adrenaline is bad. I need to calm down. I need to breathe. So I'm doing my best to do 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out with these tripling contractions and the worry of meconium coming out of me. But I did also recognize that meconium was a sign of breech baby. If obviously when their tummy gets squeezed, sometimes that can obviously come out more prevalently than if a baby is head down.
Did the midwife say anything about breech when they did the vaginal exam, or knowing that there's meconium pouring out?
When she checked, so I mentioned to her about the breech position with meconium, but when they checked me, they did think maybe a cervical lip. And again, I was like, well, that just means wait longer, doesn't it? Like, I just need to wait for this lip to get out the bloody way. But anyway, so they said to me, that the only thing we can offer you at this point really is to transfer to hospital if you want to. And we can get more information there, because if the baby is breech, obviously there's not many providers that are, in the UK at least, they don't do the training anymore either. And I was like, oh, for goodness sake. But also, again, it's that flip-flop, because you're having one conversation with one person in actual time, but then also having a million conversations in your mind. And I remember just being so conscious of this high under my ribcage feeling of her head. And I was like, oh, she's stuck. Like, there's no downward movement. There's meconium. And there was this real stuck feeling in my body. And because I couldn't get myself in any other position than all fours, I think if I'd maybe been encouraged to move around a little bit more, or maybe I tried to move around a little bit more, it maybe would have helped. But anyway, so I made the decision to transfer, because in my mind I was like, oh, she's going to have to be cut out of me, because I'm not going to accept induction medications to speed things along, because obviously I didn't really know what they offer that to me. I didn't want that anyway, ironically, and then had all of the medication when I had the C-section. And I was going through all these things of what I knew they could offer me in hospital. But anyway, made the decision to transfer. And I remember at that point, once we'd made the decision, I remember being unable to get myself dressed because I'd lost the ability to figure out what clothes to put on. So my husband had to get me clothes and help me get dressed. And then I was like, oh God, and now we've got to drive in the car. Fortunately, the local hospital is only 10-minute drive away at most. Yeah. But I was like, nothing is going to stop. Like, it's not like I leave the house and then this all kind of pauses for a second while So we got my mother-in-law to drop us to the hospital, because I was like, don't you dare call me an ambulance. I was like, how embarrassing. Don't do that. I'm not being blue lighted to hospital. So anyway, she took us to the hospital. We got out and then we got into the relevant places in the hospital, all the while, contractions are still happening, and they put us in one of what I think is a birth room. And I literally just got back onto my hands and knees again, and was just on all fours. And they sort of said to me, oh, Chloe, let's get you on a mat. They have got some crash mats in there. So they popped me on a mat, and I kind of went between the mat and the bathroom and was just didn't know whether to be up or down or what. And they got me onto the bed with the back of the bed raised so that I could hold on. So I was in a kneeling position, but more upright. And that was at least a bit of relief on my wrists. And they did offer me gas and air and things like that. And I think maybe if I'd have had some gas and air, that might have been helpful for me, because it might have just taken the edge off of the panic that I was then in, because I was then in hospital and worrying about having to advocate for myself and all that kind of stuff. But at that point, they asked me if they could do another cervical check. And I was just so at a loss. I was like, yeah, whatever. I was like, just do whatever you like. So they gave me another check, and they thought at that point I was fully dilated. And they gave me some IV fluids as well, because I couldn't remember if I had drunk any fluid in the recent hours, because this is now 7 or 8 p.m. at night, I think.
Mm-hmm.
From when the midwives came to my house at about 5 or 6 p.m. So it'd been another couple of hours. So they gave me IV fluids, and I think I had, I want to say like 1.5 liters at least of fluids that they gave me.
Yeah.
And because I didn't want any of the other interventions, I was like, you're going to have to cut her out of me because she's just not coming. And again, we still didn't know that she was a she. I was like, you're just going to have to cut them out of me because there's just no other way. They're stuck. They're not coming out. There's no downward progression, like help me sort of thing. But then also I really didn't want that. I really didn't want to be cut open. I really didn't want to have, multiple layers of my abdomen sliced. But I'd really convinced myself that that was going to be like the only way. I had tunnel vision at that point. And so the consultant, I think it was, that was working on shift at the time, she kept kind of coming in and saying, okay, well, if this is what you want, you need to make a decision. And I was just not able to make that decision because I really didn't want it. And I was just at a loss. And I'm looking at my husband. And as I say, my midwife was actually working a shift in the hospital that night, which was actually a blessing in disguise. So she was kind of trying to chat to me a little bit, but I just couldn't hear anyone really. I was there, but I wasn't there. I was kind of like this. I think she came in about 3 different occasions, the consultant who did the C-section, asking me to make a decision because it was getting late.
At this point, had they confirmed baby was breech?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they did the cervical check where they thought I was fully dilated, and they said, I think I can feel a bum. And I was like, oh, okay. So then they were like, can we do a scan? I said, yeah, at this point, it doesn't matter. Like the things that I'd read about ultrasounds for earlier pregnancy, I wasn't worried about it anymore. This baby is fully developed at this point. So they did a very, very quick scan. They were really quick, give them their due. And they said, yep, breech baby. And I said, I was like, but breech is a variation of normal. I was also telling them, but you're going to have to cut her out of me. Jekyll and Hyde. So they said to me, look, we don't do breech births really anymore. We're not trained on it, but here's some things that you can do, deep lunges. Let's try and change your position. But it was all just, I think, at the wrong point in the labour for me. So I was just kind of like, my brain, I'd made up my mind. I don't think you could have changed my mind for love nor money at that
Mindset
point.
is everything.
100%. And I just completely lost all confidence in it. And I felt like so stuck, whether that was just a mindset thing or whether it was a physical thing as well. So the third time she came in and she said, have you made your decision? And I was like, yeah, like whatever, just give me the paper. Let's just do it because I don't feel like this is getting anywhere. So then they prepped me for the C-section, and they'd given me some tablets. I think they were anti-sickness maybe, or anti-acid or something like that. They're like, take these, which I didn't take because I was just so not there. And then they wheeled me through, and they said, obviously when they come to do the spinal block was what I was offered because I didn't want an epidural, but they said they wouldn't do it at this point anyway. But I wasn't aware of differences between epidural and spinal. Yeah, everyone was very, very nice. Like once you get to that point, because they knew that this was the complete opposite end of the spectrum to what I had hoped for, they were all very nice and getting you all prepped and everything. And when they get you to round your back so that they can pop the needle in, and once the spinal kicked in, I just remember this like just a moment of complete relief because it had all kind of stopped. And as they laid me down onto the bed, they said to me, oh, you need to straighten your legs. And I'm thinking, well, I can't feel anything, so I don't know if my legs are bent or straight. But they kind of helped me straighten one of my legs. And I have a previous psoas tear from 2017. So I've got like a bit of scar tissue on my psoas on my right leg.
Yeah.
And as they straightened my leg, I felt that go like tear almost again. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, I think you've just retorn my psoas. And they're like, oh, you'll be fine. The spinal will numb it anyway. Anyway, so they wait for it all to kick in. And as they started doing the C-section, there was one of, I don't know, I'm not sure on the terminology of who's doing what in the surgery. But I know there was at least 2 consultants that ended up being in my surgery, but I'm not sure if there was a third one as well.
Yeah.
So there was the initial lady who was definitely a consultant. There was a gentleman that came and he was a maternal fetal medicine consultant, but he specializes in complex C-sections. And then there was another lady, so maybe she was the registrar. the first lady who was initially doing the procedure, and then I hear her ask for some help. And then that's when the consultant, who was like, she's the head of midwifery in the local hospital, and she came in, and then they were like, God, I'm having a little bit of trouble with the head. And I was thinking, okay. And obviously you're just kind of there with the curtain up, sort of just wriggling around a little bit. Thank God the adrenaline in my arms and they were flailing out next to me. I kept saying to the anaesthetist, because obviously they're behind you and my husband's behind me, will somebody stop this arm from moving? It's driving me mad. Like, please make it stop. And that sort of distracted my attention while they're talking about the head being tricky to get. And then they asked for forceps. So there was 2 female consultant registrars, doctors, whatever they were, and then the male came in last, and he was the MFM for complex C-sections. And I ended up having a T-incision, so complex C-section. And then
Want to just explain that for the listeners of what that means?
Yeah, so on the uterus, not on my external scar. My external is a normal horizontal, like bikini line scar. But on the uterus, they've done an inverted T. But there was also some downward tearing when they obviously opened my uterus up. That was because they were having trouble getting her head out. So the legs and body came free quite easily from my abdomen, but then the head was quite firmly compacted in my uterus. When I had the debrief afterwards, they basically said my uterus was still quite tightly contracted around her head. So that stuck feeling that I had in labour, whether that was a physical thing that was actually going on, it kind of seemed that way because that's what happened in the C-section as well, or whether it was an interruption of natural processes. I don't know. Like, that's the back and forth that I've had in my mind, which I'll never get full confirmation for or against. So that made the kind of processing of it quite hard because it's a bit of mental gymnastics. But yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's kind of holding on to the head, the uterus, by the way that you described it. Yeah.
That's what the maternal fetal medicine gentleman said.
Yeah. And I just want to add in there that women who have J scars or T scars, it's commonly referred to as special scars. I'm pretty sure there's a website, there's a support group. So anyone out there who has had this or experiences this, there are other women out there, and it could be nice to connect in with that community.
Yeah, so I'm part of the Facebook group,
Great.
the Special Scars, Special Hope group it's called. But yeah, so they did that, and I remember hearing them saying, "Oh, I'm having trouble getting the head. Can we have the forceps?" And I thought, "Oh, forceps in a C-section birth? I've never heard of that before." And that sort of was alarm bells. But they did eventually get her head out with the forceps, and that was okay. And they took her away to obviously do whatever they do, and then they were getting the placenta out, and they said, "Oh, the placenta's a bit rough," or something along those lines. But I don't know whether that was just where they had to get it away from the wall of my uterus. I remember it as hearing a little cry from her and then them saying that she wasn't breathing, but my husband said it was actually the other way around. But she had a little bit of vernix in her airways, which they believed was stopping her from breathing. So they suctioned her airways, and then she did breathe and cry, and then they brought her over to us. I think there was minimal delayed cord clamping, a couple of minutes or so, which was a shame because I would have liked it to have been a little bit longer. So there was definitely optimal kind of blood from the placenta to her. When they cut the cord, before they did that, they said, "Oh, do you want to cut the cord?" And I sent my husband. I was like, "Yes, you must. Like, we need to be part of this thing. Like, just them dealing with it. Like, this is our baby." So he went and cut the cord, and they got a few pictures and stuff like that, which I don't like those pictures now, like the hospital setting. It just makes me feel really sad. But so yeah, he cut the cord, and then they brought her over to me for skin to skin. But like I say, I've got a really short torso, so the curtain was really high up on my chest, and I felt quite claustrophobic anyway. And then when they plonked her on me, I was kind of like, I'm long-sighted as well, so I can't see this baby. I'm like,
it's just a blur.
I was like, I really love her, and I really want to hold her, but I can't see her from this angle. So I was like, please, will you take her to my husband? So he took her and was holding her in those initial moments, which was good. And she was absolutely fine. And then they were asking about the vitamin K. And I said, please, oral vitamin K, please, and I'll do the follow-up from there. I didn't want her to have the injection.
Yeah.
And the reason I chose that, because I know some people opt not to do it at all, but with what I had learnt about vitamin K and the reasons for or against having it, because she'd had the forceps and like it was a little bit tricky, I was just kind of like, I think
Yeah.
this will be a safe option. Let's go with the oral route. She can be monitored and, you know, make sure everything's okay in that respect. And she was absolutely fine. I was absolutely fine in the kind of recovery, because you get about 24 hours, I think, in hospital until you can go to the toilet and walk around yourself after the C-section. So after all of that, obviously they're sorting me out and everything else. I remember them saying, "Oh, you see that space there? That's where the bowels go. So if you pop that back in there," and I thought, "Oh, my bowels are on the table."
My
Like, it was
goodness.
such a strange thing to hear, but it just stuck in my mind. Oh, and one other thing to note as well, which I think again is quite interesting, with the tightness of my uterus around her head, they did
Yeah.
actually have to give me a second dose of muscle relaxant. That was another thing that happened, which they said
Yeah.
is not part of the norm. So then obviously they take us off and they give you, you know, they offer you tea and toast and all that jazz. And I was quite glad to have a little bit of crappy bread toast in the hospital because I hadn't eaten anything for 20 odd hours at this point.
Did she breastfeed while you were in theatre, or not till recovery, or a ward? What did that look like?
Right when we got onto the ward, because they said to me, did
Yeah.
I want to, whilst I was in the theatre? And I said, is it okay if I wait until we get into like a different room and I'm sorted?
Yeah.
And so they could sit me up and I could kind of get myself positioned. And yeah, she latched straight away, which was like, I was so happy with that. We've never had any major issues with breastfeeding at all. And that was like a saving grace for me, because if that had not worked out as well or had been challenging, that would have really added another layer of just complexity and, you know, the general processing of it all afterwards. Yeah, the breastfeeding went really well. The next day, they'll get you up quite quickly. But you're feeling a little bit woozy because of the medications and like the loss of blood, which wasn't a substantial loss, but enough to, you know, make a little bit of a difference. So I couldn't get up when they initially offered me, but they hadn't come around with any food for like breakfast yet. I'm quite a big eater, so not having any food for that amount of time, I was like, I need food first, please.
Yeah.
And then I did manage to get up and kind of very slowly, sort of like, oh God, are my insides going to fall out? And then not long after that, there was two of the three doctors that had operated on the surgery. They came to see me and they said about my complex cut. And they said, so normally you would have just a horizontal, but because the head was quite tricky, we had to do an inverted T. So you've got a cross-like shape on your uterus. So we would never advise you attempt a vaginal birth in the future. You should only opt for planned C-sections in the future. And this is not even 24 hours after I've had my baby. And I was just there like, okay. And it almost, at that point in time, it was kind of like, oh, like you shouldn't have kids ever again kind of thing. Like that's the way I received it. And I was just like, oh my God, you've just shattered my entire idea of what my future's going to look like, because I would like to have 3 or so children, or, you know, whatever happens kind of thing. And yeah, I just remember being like, oh God, like my whole world crashed around me for a second. So yeah, that was a lot to take on that initial day afterwards.
Have you read Hazel Keetal's feedback book? Yeah.
No, it's on my list of ones to read though.
Yeah. Collagen, raspberry leaf tea. There's been some thought around that to strengthen uterine muscles, but then also the scar tissue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband and I, we love to research. So we went straight into like optimal recovery and things like red light therapy and copper peptides and like all these different, you know, all the more unique things that maybe is not mainstream, but things that could be beneficial.
And you're in the special scars group, so I'm sure you've heard stories where they do vaginally birth.
Yeah. Yes, that was really nice, because there was a little bit of unknown as well, because the complex C-section consultant, the gentleman who was the doctor in there that came and he actually got her head out with the forceps. He was like, oh, I think there might have been a J extension as well, or maybe it wasn't, maybe there was. And I was like, what have you done to my insides? Unknown. But I spoke to another friend who's a doula and was a midwife, and she sort of said, you know, a scar is a scar. Yes, yours might be complex, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a no-go zone. You know, you still have options there. You still have choice. So that was nice to hear in that 4th trimester of being very vulnerable and feeling really kind of broken almost. But yeah, so we had a standard couple of nights in the hospital. All was good. We were fine. We went home, and then I think it was literally like that afternoon after we'd been sent home, I had the first midwife visit, and she took my blood pressure and it was high.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, it's probably because you're here. Like, you're making me feel nervous. As though she waited, and then we took another blood pressure reading and it got higher, and we waited. She took another blood pressure reading and it just got higher. And she was like, I'm really sorry, Chloe, but I'm going to ring triage and they're going to recommend you come back in. And I was like, oh, no, please, no, I don't want to go back to hospital. Again, I felt like it was my doing. I felt like I was naughty and that I was making my blood pressure high. So I needed to, fix this. I needed to get calm down, relax, breathe, make my blood pressure go down. So anyway, we did end up going back in that evening. It's like 5 p.m. in the evening. We didn't get seen until like 10 or 11 p.m. at night. So we were waiting for a long time with newborn baby, milk
Potential
coming in.
preeclampsia.
Yeah. And like, I remember being there with my manual pump, my hacker, just collecting milk because like my boobs were rocks.
Yeah.
And they gave me one dose of a medication. I think it was like Labetalol or something. It's called. It was a neon orange pill. They gave me one. Nothing happened. My blood pressure went up. They gave me another dose. However many hours later it is that they have to wait. Nothing happened. Blood pressure went up. And obviously, the more I'm in there, the more agitated I was getting. So I felt, again, it was me doing it. And so I ended up having an overnight stay in the hospital that night. And then the next day, because the communication between patient and whoever tells you what's happening, the nurses, I think it is, or midwives, and then the doctor coming to see you, there's like it felt like a lot of disconnect. It'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
doctor, we'll be with you soon. Okay, well, how long is soon? And it would be 4 hours, 5 hours. And I got really fed up. I said, look, this isn't making me feel any better. I was like, how can I recover in this environment of unknown and newborn baby and uncomfortable beds and everything else? So, I discharged myself. And they had given me some medication to go home with, but I don't think the combination was quite right. And they'd given me a really strange timing schedule to take the tablets on. It was like one at 8 p.m. at night, one at 10 p.m. at night. And I was like, but I go to bed at 8:30. Anyway, so then after I discharged myself, the midwife came back round that afternoon and the same thing happened. My blood pressure went up and it went up and it went up. And I said, this is the routine they've given me. Can I not take it sooner if my blood pressure is just going up? And she said, yeah, I don't understand what that's all about. Let me ring triage, see what they say. So I ended up going back in again. No, I stayed at home that night. And then the next day, again, they came back out because obviously they were keeping a check on me. And the same thing, like my blood pressure just kept going up basically. So we went back in that following night. And it was like the same situation. My blood pressure is just creeping up and up and up. And at that point, they're obviously testing for protein in the urine and the liver enzymes, which I didn't have any of those numbers being out of whack. I never had any, visual blood blurriness or any headaches, anything like that. It was just literally blood pressure that was just uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Then eventually they did get the blood pressure to go down a bit, but then I would have a spike again in the middle of the night. And then they gave me another random tablet in the middle of the night. And then the next day, a registrar did come and see me. And of course, we're creeping closer to Christmas at this point. So there's a lot less staff around. There's a lot of people on holiday and stuff like that. And so this random lady registrar, she came in at midday and was like, yeah, all good. You can go home. And I said, but they said I needed to be monitored for 24 hours and have stable blood pressure. But you gave me something random in the night. So am I taking home 3 medications now? She said, oh no, those 2 that you've got, we're going to tweak that slightly and then you can go home. And I was like, oh, okay. So can you just make sure it's like really written out layman's terms, as simple as possible? Because I don't take medication other than maybe a paracetamol once a year. I said, yep. We'll make sure it's all as simple as possible. You can go home. And I was like, okay. Like, as far as I'm concerned, you haven't stabilized my blood pressure the way you said. But I was like, you said go home. I'm going home. So we went home. And then again, it's like deja vu. The midwife comes round, takes my blood pressure, and it's going up. I was like, oh. And it was like the same kind of thing. Like, you can go in or you can stay home and see how it goes. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to have my dinner and then I'm going to see how things are, go for a walk with the dog, and then decide what to do from there. And it was the first walk outside we had done since I'd been home. So I was still recovering a lot from the C-section. And I remember it was not a long walk. It was literally round the next road and back. And we got halfway and I was I was thinking to myself, I feel really dizzy. Like I need to stop for a second. My brother lives on the road that we had stopped on. My husband said, "Oh, do you want to go to their house? Do you want to stop there? Should we call someone to pick us up and take us the last bit home?" And I was like, "No, don't be silly. I'm so close to home. Literally, you could throw a stone." But anyway, so we got home, packed the bag again, went back to the hospital. But I think because we'd waited a little while before we went, when we arrived at the triage, you have to be like buzzed in, and there was nobody to let us in for over an hour. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking like, oh God, I could have a stroke at any minute. I might have a heart attack.
Mm.
You know, what if I collapse? I've got a newborn and my husband's here. And there's nobody on the maternity ward like answering us on the buzz phones. And there's nobody in the triage unit answering the buzz phone either. They've just said they'll come get us when there's someone available. And so you kind of like panicking yourself in like, have I got blurriness in my eyes? Am I seeing like visual disturbances? Have I got a headache? Like, and the ward was so hot as well. It was boiling. It must have been like 30 degrees in there, I swear. Eventually they let us in. The doctor or registrar that I saw at that point was the same one that had been in my C-section.
Okay.
And she looked at me and she said, "Why did they send you home?" And I was like,
Good question.
They said I could go home. And she was like, "I can't believe they sent you home. This is ridiculous." Like she was looking back through my notes of all of my blood pressure readings that they'd done. And she was like, "And they're waking you up to take your blood pressure?" And I said, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh, goodness sake." And she was really quite cross about it. So she basically said, "Right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to stay for 24 hours. Every time you wake up to feed baby, I want you to buzz the thing. We'll take your blood pressure and we're going to get this under control." And they basically had to up my dose of the 2 initial medications they'd given me. And so I was taking them morning and evening, and that did get it all kind of under wraps. So I took that home. I had the 2 medications, a fairly high dose of it. Like, I think there was only one more notch they could kind of go up with those particular medications. And then we finally got to go home and just relax with our newborn. Yeah. So it was quite a ride. That said, I did almost have a little bit of like, it felt a bit like holiday blues from the hospital.
Yeah.
We'd been in there so much. It was just like, oh, I miss it. But then also the sound of the blood pressure monitor being wheeled to your room was like awful. We got it under wraps and eventually got off it after the 6 to 8 week period. I think it was about 8 weeks, and I started to wean myself off because the last doctor I'd spoken to in my local practice sort of said, "Oh yeah, just keep taking it." And I was like, no, that's not what's supposed to be happening here. Like we're supposed to be off. But yeah, and then I had the debrief with the maternal fetal medicine consultant that did complex C-sections, and he explained a bit more about the special scar, and yeah, basically just said that he's been a complex C-section consultant and he hadn't seen anything like the situation with the head being stuck in his time, and he'd worked in America and different places and stuff like that. So for him, he said that was like a new thing that he hadn't experienced before. So
yeah, unusual. I've heard women say things like Bobby was stuck under my rib, but that still complexes my brain of, well, how do they get stuck under the rib? And maybe that's what was actually happening, is that the uterus was clamping onto the head. Who knows?
Yeah, well, from some of the other stories that I've heard, obviously with breech positioning sometimes being higher, and then I think because my waters were releasing in the days before but trickling, I wonder whether the reduced fluid kind of meant that there wasn't that ease of movement to go down as the uterus is trying to bring baby down into a better position. But I don't know, that's just kind of ponderings I've had.
I guess the other thing, when you're a very fit person, history of dancing, PT, you can have tight ligaments. Having regular sessions and massage in that area can help make space for baby to move down before that point as well. So I think that's very important for other people who are in that space like yourself. Thank you. 2 questions for you. What kind of resources would you recommend to mums with a breech baby on board?
Well, the Breech Birth podcast.
Great, love it.
I wish it'd been around like a year sooner, because I would have absorbed it all, I think. But obviously having a breech baby makes it all the more poignant to listen to. I would thoroughly recommend the Midwife's Cauldron podcast, because I think that's a really good resource just for a whole plethora of information. And then there's other offshoots that come off of that with like Dr. Rachel Reed's work. Gosh, there's a lot of books that I read but they were all more sort of home birth and like unassisted birth oriented, but just as the complete opposite end of the spectrum to what you kind of get with the mainstream routes of birth.
Yeah. That's,
Definitely podcasts, I think, is easy to listen to.
yeah. My last question for you is, knowing what you know now and having the experience that you've had, would you do anything differently next time if you have a breech baby?
I think I would definitely get more external, like palpitation, that kind of stuff, so that you could confirm that it's breech positioning from somebody else's perspective, not just trying to guess for yourself. I don't think I would have a different choice of birth, like home birth. I would still want that, but maybe to have a doula on hand as an additional just bit of support, mental support more than anything. Someone to say, this is normal, keep going, sort of thing. Or, yeah.
Yeah. Can I recommend that you slow down sooner?
Yes. I now only work part time.
Great. Love it. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's great.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Breech Birth podcast. These stories matter. They stretch what we think we know and bring voice to experiences that need to be heard. I'm so grateful to the women who have shared their experiences with us, raw, real, and full of wisdom. If this episode resonated with you, please follow, share, or leave a review. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Breech Birth Podcast. And if you have a breech story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, may we continue to reclaim the narrative, one story at a time.